The old furnace in the Harwick cottage had a specific sound when it was about to quit. A low, wet rattle, like something caught in the throat of it, followed by 3 seconds of silence before the burner tried again. I'd serviced enough furnaces in this valley to know that sound meant one thing, and I'd crouched down in that basement 100 times in my life, with my hand on the igniter housing, reading what the machine was trying to tell me. That November evening, I wasn't thinking about the furnace. I was thinking about what she'd said in the doorway upstairs, before I came down, before I made myself busy with a wrench and the familiar smell of gas and dust so I wouldn't have to look at her face when she said it. Something she hadn't planned to say, something that came out quiet and careful, with tears already starting, while the first edge of the storm was pressing against the kitchen windows behind her. She asked me not to let something be a goodbye. And I almost let it be one anyway, the way I always did, the way I'd been doing since the last time I decided the quiet was easier than the asking. That's the thing about a man who's good with his hands. He gets very practiced at fixing things, and very bad at keeping them. My name is Cole Marsh. I'm 31 years old and I've lived in Granger Falls, Vermont my whole life, except for 3 months in my late 20s when I drove to Portland on a bad idea and drove home again on a better one. I work for my Uncle Dale's service company, Marsh & Sons, which has been keeping furnaces and heat pumps running in this valley since before I was born. It's 5 trucks now, and a dispatch line, and a shop on the edge of town that smells like solder and motor oil, and Dale's terrible coffee. I run the residential calls from October through March because that's when the heaters fail, and heaters always fail at the worst possible time, and somebody has to go. I had not made my peace with Sarah. 3 years before I knocked on the door of the Harwick cottage, Sarah Klein packed a carry-on and a single-checked bag and flew to Seattle for a job she'd wanted her whole career, and I stood in the parking lot at Burlington Airport and said, "That's a great opportunity, Sar," and hugged her, and watched her go through the doors, and drove home with both hands on the wheel and the radio off. I didn't ask her to stay. I didn't tell her I'd be the same person if she changed her mind, or that the space she was leaving would stay the shape of her for a long time. I just said it was a great opportunity, because it was, and because that was easier than anything true. She sent one text from Seattle that said the mountains look different out there. I texted back a thumbs up, which is the worst possible response a man could give to that sentence, and I've known it since the moment I sent it. After that, I kept things smaller. Shorter, I'd pull back before anything had a chance to end badly, and I told myself that was being careful. That was the kind of careful that costs you things you don't realize you're losing until you're kneeling in a stranger's basement with a wrench in your hand, trying not to hear what somebody just said to you from the top of the stairs. The call came in on a Tuesday in early November, 3rd week of the month, when the first real cold had come down from Canada, and everybody with a system older than 15 years was suddenly discovering why they'd been meaning to have it serviced since spring. The Harwick rental on Maple Street was on my route anyway. Old stone foundation, radiator system, boiler from 2007 that I'd serviced twice before when the Harwicks owned it outright. They'd converted it to a rental 2 years back, and whoever was staying there now had called the line that morning with a description of the sound, like it's coughing, sort of. And then it stops for a second. That told me exactly what was wrong before I even pulled into the drive. I knocked. She opened the door, and for a second neither of us said anything. She was around 28, 29 maybe, with dark hair pulled back in a way that suggested she'd had it neat earlier, and stopped caring around noon. She had a camera strap around her neck even though she wasn't holding the camera, and paint on her left knuckle that was probably ink. She looked at me the way people look at servicemen, relieved to see you, slightly embarrassed that they needed you. "You're the furnace person," she said. "Cole Marsh. Marsh & Sons. Lena Aldridge." She stepped back to let me in. I've been hearing that sound for a week. I kept thinking it would sort itself out. "They don't," I said. "The good ones keep complaining until you listen. It's the ones that go quiet you have to worry about." She laughed at that, short and surprised. "That's unsettling. It's honest," I said. "The cottage was warm enough for now, the system was struggling but holding, and she'd made it feel lived in, without making it feel permanent." A stack of photo books on the side table, a string of small lights over the kitchen window, a blue wool blanket folded over the back of the couch. She'd been here a while. I could tell the difference between a place someone was camping in and a place someone had settled into. This was settled. I headed for the basement door, and that's when I saw it, on the kitchen table. A camera bag, open, memory cards arranged in a row. One of them had a strip of tape across it with writing in black marker. Do not erase, proof I didn't say anything. It wasn't my business. I went downstairs. The boiler was exactly what I'd expected. Igniter sensor coated with dust, heat exchanger showing early stress cracks I'd need to monitor, flue fitting with a slow draft issue. Nothing dangerous yet, but nothing that was going to fix itself either. I was 20 minutes into the work when she came downstairs with 2 mugs of coffee. Is it bad? She asked. Manageable, I said, taking the mug. Igniter sensor needed cleaning. The heat exchanger I want to keep an eye on. What does that mean? Means I'll come back in a few weeks and check it again. Probably fine through the winter if we stay ahead of it. She nodded, looking at the boiler like it was a person she'd misjudged. I didn't know boilers were this complicated. Everything's complicated if you look at it close enough, I said. That's surprisingly philosophical for someone covered in soot. Occupational hazard, I said, and she laughed again. And it was easier to talk to her than I'd expected, and I noticed that, and then I made myself stop noticing. She told me she'd been in the cottage since the 2nd week of September. 2 months. She was a photographer, she said, doing personal work. Landscapes mostly, the valley in autumn was something she'd seen in a magazine years ago and always wanted to shoot in person, and here she was. How long are you planning to stay? I asked, capping the cleaning fluid. The lease runs through the end of November, she said. I keep almost extending it. I looked up. Almost? Almost, she said, and the word had a small note of something complicated in it that she didn't explain. She walked me out when I was done. I gave her the estimate for the heat exchanger monitor visit, she signed, and I was almost to the truck when she called after me. Cole. I turned. She was standing in the doorway with the cold coming in around her, arms crossed. Thank you. The house feels different already, like it's breathing right again. That's what a furnace does when it's working, I said. You stop noticing it, and that's the point. She considered that. Maybe, she said, or maybe you just notice different things. I didn't have a good answer for that, so I got in the truck. I sat there a second longer than I needed to before I started the engine. I came back the following Thursday for what I told myself was a pipe insulation check. The exposed pipes in the crawl space off the basement were old copper, and the temperature was dropping fast. And it was a legitimate thing to do before the real cold set in. It was also the kind of thing I'd never proactively scheduled for a short-term rental before in my entire career with Marsh & Sons. She had coffee waiting again when I knocked. I figured you might come back, she said, holding the door. I made a whole pot. You didn't have to do that, I said. You're about to go into my crawl space, she answered. Coffee is the least I can do. We stood in the kitchen while I drank it, and she was looking out the window at the ridgeline, where the last of the November leaves were hanging on by something like stubbornness, and she said, without turning around, how long have you lived here? My whole life, I said. Except a few months. That must be something, she said. To know a place that well. Depends on the day, I said. Some days it's everything. Some days it feels like you ran out of new things to see a long time ago. She turned at that. Which is it today? I thought about it. Better day, I said. She looked at me for a second, then smiled, and went back to her coffee and her window, and I went to the crawl space. And when I came back up, she was sitting at the kitchen table with the camera in her hands, scrolling through images on the display screen with a careful, private expression that I didn't want to interrupt. Can I ask you something? I said, pulling off my gloves. Sure, that memory card on the table the other day. The one that said don't erase? Proof, what's that? She went very still. Then she set the camera down. You noticed that, she said. Wasn't trying to pry. No, she exhaled. It's complicated work stuff. Something happened before I came up here. A situation. I documented it. She paused. That card is why I have that tape on it. Okay, I said, and didn't push, because she'd said complicated and stopped there, and that was a door with a lock on it I hadn't been given. It's not as dramatic as it sounds, she said. I didn't say anything. You made a face. I don't make faces, I said. You make small ones, she said. Quiet ones. I've been watching. I didn't know what to say to that, so I picked up my toolbox and said I'd check in on the heat exchanger in 2 weeks. She walked me to the door and said she'd be here. The second week of November, a storm rolled in from the north fast enough that Dale sent an all-hands message at 6 in the morning, and we were on calls by 7, running pre-storm checks on the priority list. The Harwick cottage wasn't on the priority list, but it was on my route home, and I told myself that was why I pulled over and knocked. She opened the door in a heavy sweater with a pencil tucked behind her ear and a confused look on her face. Is something wrong? She said. Pre-storm pass, I said. Wanted to make sure the thermostat was set high enough before this comes in. It's at 68, she said. Is that enough? Push it to 70 tonight. Old radiators lose efficiency in the first hard cold. Okay, she said. She looked past me at the sky, where the clouds were stacking up fast and gray over the ridge, the kind of sky that meant it. How bad is it going to be? 1.5 feet, maybe 2. By morning. She was quiet for a second. You want to come in for a minute? I made soup. I almost said no. Sure, I said. She made it herself, lentil with some herb I didn't know the name of, and we sat at the kitchen table with the wind starting to pick up outside and the light going low and early, and it was the kind of late afternoon that creates a specific kind of honesty, the kind where you say things because the weather gives you permission. You never told me what happened in Boston, I said. You don't have to. I was just thinking about the memory card again. She wrapped both hands around her bowl and looked at it. I had a staff job at a magazine. Editorial work, mostly, but I did the photo assignments for the longer pieces. There was an editor there, senior, connected, the kind of person who'd been there long enough that nobody questioned him. He took 2 years of my work and published it under his name in an outside collection. A book. My images. His name on the cover. She paused. I found out because a photographer I knew in New York emailed me to say congratulations. She thought I'd been in on it. I set my spoon down. He stole from you. Yes, she said. Simply like she'd been waiting to say it that plainly to someone. And the card is the proof. The card is the proof, she said. I filed a complaint. It's with the lawyers now. It's slow. Everything is slow. She looked up at me. That's why I came up here. I needed somewhere I'd never been, where nobody knew the situation, where I could just take pictures of a valley in the fall without any of that following me. Has it helped? I asked. She looked around at the kitchen, at the string of lights over the window, at the blue blanket she'd brought from wherever she'd come from, at the small, careful life she'd made in 2 months in this borrowed house. Yes, she said. More than I expected. Outside, the first snow started. Not the storm yet, just the announcement of it. Fat, quiet flakes drifting past the kitchen window like the sky was thinking about it. Come look, she said, pushing her chair back. We stood on the porch for 10 minutes in the early dark, her with a mug and her sweater, me with my jacket half open, watching the snow build on the porch railing. She didn't take a picture. She just watched, and I stood next to her, and after a while she said, I didn't know snow could sound like that. Like what? Like nothing. Like actual nothing. I knew what she meant. I'd lived next to it my whole life and stopped hearing it the way she was hearing it now. We went back inside. I told her I should get home before the roads changed. She walked me to the door and said thank you for stopping, not for the thermostat, just for stopping. It was on my route, I said. Cole, she said, and smiled, and she knew I was lying, and I knew she knew, and we left it at that. The last Sunday of November, she sent me a text at 9 in the evening. The display on the thermostat was flashing an error code. I drove over. It was a sensor reading, nothing serious, a false alarm from the wind pressure on the exhaust flue, and I had it cleared in 15 minutes. But I didn't leave for another hour. We sat at the kitchen table, and she put music on low, something instrumental that filled the quiet without crowding it, and she showed me photographs on her laptop from here, not Boston. The covered bridge off Route 14 in the first frost, the church steeple in morning fog, a stand of birch trees stripped bare, their white trunks against the gray sky so clean and still they looked like something someone had done in a single careful breath. This one, I said, pointing. That's the Callister Bridge. My grandfather built it. Not the road version, the original walking bridge before the county put the road in. His name is on a plaque on the north side that nobody looks at. She looked at me. Take me there, she said. Before I go, I want to photograph it, and I want you to show me which plank his hands touched. Before she went, I heard that the way you hear something you'd been pretending wasn't coming. The lease ran through the end of November. There were 8 days left in November. Okay, I said, because it was all I had. She smiled, easy, not knowing what those 2 words had cost me to keep casual, and poured more coffee, and we talked for another 40 minutes about the valley and the winters and the way the light changed in January in a way she'd never see. And I drove home afterward with both hands on the wheel and the radio off. We went to the bridge on a Wednesday, the last Wednesday of the month, cold and clear with a sky so blue it looked like it had been scrubbed. She went quiet as soon as she got out of the truck, the way she always went quiet when the camera was out. She moved in slow circles around the covered bridge, crouching, stepping back, tilting her head. I stood off to the side and watched her work, and after a while I stopped watching the camera and started watching her face. The way her expression changed when she found the angle she was looking for, the small, decisive stillness right before she pressed the shutter. How old is it? She called, without lowering the camera. The road bridge? Built in '61. The original walking bridge was my grandfather's, 1933. The county replaced the road span, but they kept the walking path off the south side. Show me. I took her around the south side, through the snowpack, and pointed to the plaque on the interior beam. She stopped and read it. Edwin P. Marsh, she said quietly. Your grandfather. His middle name was Percival, I said. He hated it. Never told anybody. It's on the plaque because my grandmother put it there after he died and he couldn't argue with her about it. She laughed. Then she raised the camera and took the photo, close, with her left hand in the frame touching the letters. Why the hand? I asked. So it's not just a sign, she said. A sign on a wall means nothing. A hand on a name means someone came here and touched it and it mattered to them. I looked at the plaque and then at her hand still resting on it. He would have liked knowing somebody photographed it, I said. He built things and he didn't like them going unnoticed. Did you get that from him? She asked, pulling her hand back. What, the building or the not liking to go unnoticed? Either, she said, looking at me sideways. Both, probably, I said. Though I'm better at hiding the second one. She considered that for a moment, like she was deciding whether to say what was already clear to her. You're not as hard to read as you think, Cole. So I'm told, I said. Maybe this month you stop trying so hard, she said. We walked back along the path my grandfather had put down, and I told her how the land had changed hands 3 times since 1933, and how my Uncle Dale had once tried to buy the walking parcel, and the county said no, and she asked questions the way she always asked them, the kind that pulled more out of me than I'd planned to give. On the drive back she was quiet, and not the easy quiet from the porch or the kitchen table. A thinking quiet. Dana's coming, she said. My sister. This weekend. To visit? She looked out the window. To help me pack. I kept my eyes on the road. The lease is up. Yes, she said. Are you extending it? I asked, and I tried to say it the same way I'd say it to any tenant, and I don't know how well I managed that. She didn't answer right away. My mother had a procedure 2 weeks ago, she said. Cardiac. It wasn't serious, but Dana's been managing everything, the appointments, the insurance, the house. For 3 months, I've been up here. She paused. I need to go be there. I understand that, I said. And I did. I just also understood the other thing, the thing I wasn't saying. It's not, she stopped. Started again. It's not that I want to go. Okay, I said. I just said that and you said okay, she answered. You could say something else. I know, I said. I'm working on it. She looked at me. I could feel it. I kept my eyes on the road. Dana arrived on a Friday afternoon in a sensible gray SUV, packed with folded boxes she'd brought from Portland. I knew she was there because Lena texted me. My sister got here. Wanted to let you know in case the truck spooked you when you came for the exchanger check. I'd almost forgotten about the heat exchanger check. Almost. I went on Saturday morning, with the big storm on the forecast for Sunday into Monday. Which meant it was genuinely the right time to check it, and also meant the truck in the drive would have a legitimate reason to be there. Dana answered the door. She was taller than Lena, with the same dark hair cut shorter, and the organized look of a woman who managed things well and knew it. She looked at my uniform and my toolbox and said, "The furnace guy." "Cole Marsh," I said. "Marsh and Sons. Dana Aldridge." She didn't invite me in immediately, and I didn't take it personally. "Lena's upstairs. Come in." The cottage was already half transformed. Boxes in the corner of the living room, the photo books stacked to go. The string of lights over the kitchen window still up, but the rest of the small personal touches already beginning to disappear. The blue blanket was folded on top of a box. Lena came downstairs in an old flannel shirt, the kind you wear when you're doing something that feels like a loss, and you want to be comfortable while you do it. "Hey," she said. "I made coffee." "I'll get it," Dana said, which was kind and also managerial, and she disappeared into the kitchen. Lena looked at me. "She drove 6 hours," she said quietly. "She's in efficiency mode." "I can see that," I said, just as quiet. I went to the basement. The heat exchanger check was real. I had a scope and I took readings, and everything was within tolerance, which I knew it would be, because I'd been tracking this unit for weeks. I was down there longer than I needed to be. Dana found me on my way back up. She was standing at the bottom of the stairs with 2 mugs of coffee, and she handed me one, and she had the look of a woman who had something to say and had been deciding how to say it since the moment I walked in. "Can I ask you something directly?" she said. "Sure," I said. "How long have you been coming around here?" "Not unkind, just clear. I service the unit," I said. "I've been here 4 times since early November." "4 times," she said. She looked at the basement wall for a second, then back at me. "She talks about this town, about the valley. She didn't used to talk about it like that before. She'd say Vermont, or the cottage, and now she says Granger Falls, and she says it like it means something specific." I didn't say anything. I held the coffee. "I'm not here because I don't like you," Dana said. "I don't even know you. I'm here because my mother asks about Lena every single day. And I've been the one answering for 3 months. And I'm 41 and I have 2 kids, and I can't be the only one holding that household together anymore." She paused. Her jaw tightened. "She's been hurt. Boston was bad. She ran from it the way she runs from things when she doesn't know what else to do. And whatever this is up here, whatever it is between you and her, I'm not saying it isn't real. I'm saying she needs to go home and face the rest of her life, and it is not going to help her if someone gives her a reason to keep putting that off." There was nothing cruel in the speech. That was the part that made it land. "I understand," I said. "Do you?" she asked. "Because understanding it and doing the right thing with it are different." "I know that," I said. She nodded once, like that was settled, and turned back toward the kitchen, and left me standing in the stairwell with my toolbox and a mug of coffee that had gone lukewarm, knowing she wasn't wrong about a single thing she'd said. Lena found me there 2 minutes later. "What did she say?" she asked. "Nothing I didn't already know," I answered. She looked at me a long moment. "Cole, you should go," I said. "Your mother needs you and Dana needs you, and that's the right call." "I mean that." She looked like she was going to say something else. Then she didn't. I left shortly after, telling them both I'd do a final check before the storm to make sure the system held through the week for whoever the next tenant was. Lena walked me to the truck. "When are you leaving?" I asked, because I needed to know in the way you need to know how much time there is to not say things. "Tuesday," she said. "After the storm clears." "Tuesday? 3 days. Drive safe when you go," I said. "The roads will be icy until Wednesday on the back roads." She looked at me like I'd said the wrong thing, though she didn't say so. "I'll be careful," she said, and went back inside. I drove home with both hands on the wheel. The radio stayed off. The storm came Sunday night and ran through Monday, 2 feet on the level and more in the drifts. And I was on calls from before dawn until after dark, both days. Water heaters, heat pumps, one gas line issue on the south side of town that took 4 hours, and a phone call to the county. I was too busy to think about Tuesday, which I think is why I kept stacking up the overtime voluntarily. Why I took every call Dale offered and drove the routes twice and stayed at the shop until 9 o'clock Monday night inventorying stock I could have counted in my sleep. Tuesday morning, the roads were passable, and the sky was that particular hard blue you only get after a winter storm. Everything washed clean and sharp-edged, the snow on the ridge glittering so bright it was almost painful to look at. I had a final boiler check for the Harwick cottage on my schedule. A real one. Legitimately, a unit that's been running hard through a 2-foot storm needed a post-event inspection before the next tenant came in. And I was the one who'd been tracking it all month. I could have sent Marcus or had Dale call over. I went myself. Dana's SUV was gone from the drive. She'd left the night before. Lena had texted me at 7 p.m. the previous evening. Dana headed back tonight. I have the rest of the packing to finish. I hadn't texted back. The door opened before I knocked. Lena was standing there in the heavy sweater again, hair loose, and behind her the cottage was almost entirely itself again. Boxes stacked by the door, the string of lights over the kitchen window, the last thing still up, the blue blanket gone. "I figured you'd come," she said. It wasn't an accusation. It was just a thing she knew. "Final boiler check before the changeover," I said. "I know," she said. She let me in. The last boxes were near the door. One of them had the camera bag sitting on top, packed and closed. The memory cards I assumed inside it, the one with the tape label somewhere in the middle of the stack. She'd been careful with them. I noticed. I went to the basement. I ran the post-storm check. Everything read fine, the way it had every time I'd come here, because I'd been keeping ahead of this unit since the first day and there was nothing actually wrong with it anymore. I took my readings. I wrote them on the form. I stayed 15 minutes when the whole job should have taken 5. I could hear her moving upstairs. The creak of her footsteps, a box being lifted, the clunk of it being set down. I thought about Sarah. About the airport, about the thumbs up I sent to a woman who deserved 3 paragraphs and got a single image of a raised thumb. Because I'd spent so long being careful about what I let matter that I'd forgotten how to be honest when it counted. I packed my tools. I zipped the bag. I told myself that Dana was right, and Lena needed to go home. And this was a woman I'd known for less than 2 months in a rented house, and the sensible thing was to go upstairs and say, "Drive safe and get in the truck." I stood up. Halfway up the stairs, I stopped. Not because she'd said anything, just because something in me recognized the shape of what I was doing. The same way I recognized the shape of a failing furnace by the sound it made, the same low rattle, the same 3 seconds of silence before it tried again. I finished the stairs. She was standing in the kitchen, coat already on, one last bag by her feet. The string of lights above the window was off, I realized. She'd unplugged it. The kitchen looked like a kitchen in a house nobody had lived in. She heard me come up. She turned around. For a moment we just stood there in the emptied-out room, 5 feet apart, the winter light coming through the window where the lights used to be. "Everything okay down there?" she asked. "Everything's fine," I said. "System's in good shape." "You keep saying that. It's true." "Cole." She said my name like it had a period after it. "You've been in that basement for 15 minutes. The check takes 5. You told me that yourself the second time you came. I set my toolbox down on the counter. I know. She crossed her arms. Not defensively. The way you cross your arms when you're trying to hold something in place. Is there anything else you wanted to check while you're here? The question landed differently than she'd meant it to. And we both knew it. No, I said. There's nothing else I need to check. The room got quiet. Outside, a truck went past on Maple, chains on the tires crunching through the packed snow. The furnace kicked on below us, the one I'd cleaned and calibrated and monitored for 2 months, the one that didn't need anything from me anymore. I keep thinking about the January light, she said, not looking at me. You said the birches go white against the gray sky. In January, they do, I said. The whole ridge. Nothing like it. I'd like to see that, she said. Quiet. I know, I said. She looked up at me then, and I looked at her, and we were two people standing in an empty kitchen being very careful, and I was 3 seconds from picking up my toolbox and being careful all the way out to the truck. That's when she smiled, and the tears came up behind the smile before she could decide what to do about them, and she looked at me across the empty kitchen with her coat on and her bag at her feet, and said it quietly, simply, like she'd been holding it since before she knew my name. Don't let this be goodbye. I had rehearsed 100 versions of what I should say in the last 3 days. In the truck, in the shop, in the 5 minutes I'd stood in the basement just now talking myself into nothing. All of them left me. I'm not, I said. I'm not letting this be anything except the first part of something. You go. You take care of your mother. You give Dana some breathing room. And when you're ready, a month, 2 months, however long it takes, you tell me, and I'll have a reason to be wherever you are. Or you'll come back here. Or we figure out a third thing I haven't thought of yet. But it's not goodbye. I don't do goodbyes. I tried that once and it was the worst decision I ever made. And I told myself if I ever got another chance to not do it, I would say so out loud instead of getting in the truck. She was crying now, properly, without trying to hold it back, and she covered her mouth with one hand and laughed at the same time. That specific laugh that means something is too large and too real all at once. Okay, she whispered. Okay? I said. Okay, she said again, stronger, that's the whole answer. Okay, I crossed the kitchen and pulled her into my arms right there with her coat still on, and she pressed her face into my shoulder, and I put my chin on top of her head, and we stood in the empty room for a long moment with the winter light on the floor between us and the boxes at the door, and the whole ordinary miracle of a thing that almost didn't happen holding us both very still. I thought you were going to let me go, she said, into my shoulder. I almost did, I told her. I was very close. What stopped you? Stairs, I said. I stopped on the stairs. She laughed again. Stairs, the top 5 steps in that staircase have a creak pattern I know better than anything in this house. I stopped on the 5th one and just listened to myself. She pulled back and looked up at me. And? What did you hear? The same sound a furnace makes right before it quits, I said, and I know what to do with that. She left that afternoon. I carried her boxes to her car, and we stood in the driveway with our breath fogging in the cold air, and I told her the valley looked best in January when the ice on the creek came up, and the birch trees went white against the gray sky, and she said she was going to have to come back and see that, and I said yes, she was. She drove away at 2:15. I stood in the empty drive longer than I should have, then went back inside and unplugged the boiler and locked the door and took the truck back to the shop. Dale asked if the Harwick unit was cleared for the next tenant. I said yes. He nodded and went back to his paperwork and didn't ask why it had taken me 3 visits to confirm what I'd known since week 2. She called that night from a rest stop in Massachusetts. Not a text. A call. I just wanted to hear your voice, she said. Is that too much? No, I said. It's exactly enough. I'll be in Portland by 9, she said. My mother's going to be surprised. I didn't tell her I was coming home today. Good surprise or bad surprise? I asked. Good one, Lena said, and I could hear the smile behind it. Cole. Yeah, thank you for the stairs, she said. Anytime, I answered. Lena was in Portland for 7 weeks. Her mother stabilized. Dana, who had apparently expected Lena to fold at the first hard week, watched her sister do the opposite and called me out of the blue one evening in December to say, "Without preamble, you should know she talks about you to our mother." Then, she hung up before I could answer, which was entirely consistent with everything I knew about Dana Aldridge. Lena drove back into Granger Falls on the third Saturday of January at 11 in the morning, with the camera bags in the back seat and a box of her mother's Christmas cookies on the passenger seat, because her mother had insisted on sending something. She wasn't coming back to the Harwick cottage that was rented out by December. She came back to the valley, to the birch trees in January she'd never seen, and to me. She stayed at the inn for 2 nights while we figured out the next thing, and on the third morning she showed up at the shop with 2 coffees and told Dale she was going to steal his best technician for the morning. Dale looked at me over her shoulder and gave me the slow nod of a man who'd known something longer than I had, and told me to take my time. She moved into the house on Birch Hollow Road with me in March. The Boston situation resolved quietly that summer. On terms her lawyer called fair, and she called enough. She took the memory card from the camera bag that had been sitting at the bottom of her equipment case for 8 months, and she put it in a drawer instead of a fire, which she said was the better version of closing a door. I asked her to marry me on the front porch on a Saturday in October, the month I know best, the month the valley turns and you can't look at the ridge without understanding why someone might drive up from a city and never find a reason to drive back down. I handed her a coffee and then a ring and said, "Stay, the permanent version." She said yes before I finished the sentence. That old furnace in the Harwick cottage is still running. Whoever rents the place now doesn't know that I stop by every October to service it myself. Not because the company sends me. The company is mine now and I can do what I like. But because I can't help it. I kneel down in that basement with my tools, and I listen to the igniter catch, and I hear the burner take hold, and I think about a November evening, and a woman upstairs with a camera strap around her neck and a memory card that said "Don't erase." Proof. I think about the storm. I think about 5 steps on a staircase, and the silence between them, and the thing you hear when you stop long enough to listen to yourself. Some things you fix with your hands. Some things you fix by finally saying what you mean. And some things you keep by stopping on the stairs at the last possible moment and choosing to be heard instead of careful. That's the whole trick. Once you know it, you can't unknow it.